Greetings, friends. I am Matthew Knabe, licensed professional counselor. You are listening to Experience Emerge. Today, we will dive into another conversation about the broken and fractured aspects of our lives. Then we will discuss how we put these pieces back together again to find rest and live free. C.S. Lewis once said, "Miracles are a retelling in small letters of the very same story which is written across the whole world in letters too large for some of us to see." In today's episode, we are going to explore a story in hopes to gain a little bit of perspective on those larger letters. Many of us are noticing an overwhelming feeling in these uncertain times of the coronavirus. Some may feel it in their mind, body, spirit, and soul. Many of you may have never really experienced some of these visceral feelings of fear, uncertainty, and loss of control before. Today, I got to spend some time with a licensed professional clinical counselor who works at Emerge Counseling Center, just to get a better idea of what this anxiety thing is all about. Please welcome to the podcast, Tish Granville.
Well, hello there. I am Tish Granville. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor here in the state of Ohio, and I have been practicing right here at Emerge Counseling Services for nearly 11 years now. I actually started out doing my internship with Emerge, and it turned into a career. So I'm very grateful for that. And I primarily am working with kids, teens, and adults, and spending most of my clinical time treating trauma, family dysfunction, anxiety, and depression.
That's great. So obviously, we are in a very strange time, and in the last couple episodes that I've done on the podcast is obviously focusing in on the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of things have come up of late about anxiety, and that is a pretty natural response to a critical time like this. So the reason we're going to spend some time today on the podcast talking about this word anxiety. So what are we trying to comprehend with this word?
Sure, absolutely. So I have a couple of definitions, a couple of favorites. This is how I comprehend anxiety, and it's based on a lot of the stories that I've heard from clients. And honestly, I believe them to be the expert. I don't see myself as the expert, but really the expertise that I do have is because of what they've shared with me and how I filled in the gaps and connected the dots. So I've kind of gathered this conclusion about what anxiety is. So one type of anxiety is it's about a state of being safe, but still living life on the run. And we can go more into what that exactly looks like. And the other one is anxiety is a state of not being safe, yet unable to run, not able to do something. So I'll go back to the first one. Anxiety being a state of being safe, but living life on the run. So you have this runner's energy kind of going on in the body. It may not necessarily be literal, although it can be that the person actually appears to be on edge. If you were to interview someone else who knows them, very jittery, antsy, can't sit still, busy a lot. That's how it's manifesting. Maybe literally running around from place to place, trying to discharge it. But sometimes it's very figurative. It's happening in the body, the running. It's the thoughts racing. We say racing thoughts a lot, but really what is that? The thoughts are running around in your head. It's actually as if the thoughts have on Nike tennis shoes. The breath is running. The heart rate is up like a jogger's heart. And there's beads of sweat running down the face. There's perspiration. So the person doesn't perceive safety, only the threats. And so they have a lot of that running energy going on in the body. And the blood too, the blood is running through the veins. The other type of anxiety develops when there really is a threat. So the threat is real, whether it's a physical threat, whether it's a psychological one, it's very real, but maybe running isn't an option, or maybe it's not a good option. And so that energy to do something which is really what anxiety is about. It's like, I need to do something. I need to move towards this threat. I need to move away from it, so I can neutralize it. That energy is stuck inside when you can't do anything with it. And so what that does is it builds and builds and builds, and it can turn into panic, or freezing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you and I were talking a little bit before, and we were discussing the fact that um, we are living in a time right now where the stimulus is actually there. and
Yes.
and oftentimes, when, as you and I work with clients, we're talking about the emotional response to a stimulus that usually isn't really there. It's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of, situational or social.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we're living in a time where there is a fear, and there
Mm-hmm.
is there is a a social distancing, which is a word I'd never used
Never.
until
Never heard.
a month ago. And as you and I talked, as we are created to be in communion with others,
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden now, as therapists, that idea of the stimulus versus the emotional response, well,
Mm-hmm.
now the stimulus is up.
It's up. It's there.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the body response. Some of the things that you were sharing before. Go into that a little bit about what anxiety does somatically.
Oh, whew. Well, somatically, there's a lot going on. And by the way, for those who are not familiar with that word, somatic comes from the root word soma, which means body. So it's all about what's happening in the body, what's taking place. Really, anxiety is playing out there. You could say the body is under siege. All parts of the body, all systems of the body, head, heart, muscles, skin, lungs, stomach, immune system, reproductive system, nervous system. All of those systems are impacted in various ways. And it's really fascinating when you go inside and just notice what's happening, that you're really seeing how the body is responding to whatever that threat is. For instance, common things like breath rate increasing, blood pressure intensifying, heart rate, um, skin cooling or heating up, pupils dilating, throat closing and constricting. All of these things are happening right there in the home that we call our bodies. So it can be very, very dysregulating, very scary, and send more messages to the brain that, hey, I'm in trouble, I'm in danger. There's a scripture, 1 Corinthians 12:26, where Paul is talking to the body of Christ, but he's referencing the actual physical body. And he says, when one part suffers, another part suffers with it. When one part is honored, another parts rejoice. Um, right? That's really fascinating when you look at the body in that way. When one part is suffering, another part suffers with it. When the anxiety is in the mind, there are going to be other areas of the body that are suffering with the mind. And so our listeners out there probably can really resonate with that. Yes, there are parts of your body that are definitely suffering while your mind is processing threats.
Sure. So, Tish, what do we do with that? What are some things that you might share with, if I were your client today and I was sitting here and we were in your office, and well, we're not allowed to be in your office.
Yeah.
if
Not
we
right
were
now.
if we were doing telehealth like we are right now, if we were
Yes.
doing that and I was explaining to you, it's like, Tish, I am throughout the course of the day noticing my heart rate is jumping, and I'm at a resting pace or situation, and I'm noticing sweats. I'm noticing, I think I've heard clients talk about the elephant on the chest, where it's just, you get that. What do we do?
So if the suffering is happening in the body, then that means the ministry has to happen to the body. So there's going to need to be some ministering to those places where you're feeling the presence of that anxiety. And something so simple, but to just apply some touch there, find out where that location is. So you're going to have to go in and center for a second there. You're going to have to be present with those sensations, be still for a second. And then where you notice those sensations, whether that's in your heart space or the lung space, the shoulders, the neck, the back, the stomach area, you can actually apply some very gentle touch there, and see what happens when you do that. Like, the power of touch is so beautiful. It's been with us since the beginning of time, and it's a great way to offer some self-healing. So touch that space. If it's the belly, touch it and see if you can get that pendulum swinging in the opposite direction. Opposite sensation, whatever you're feeling, see if you can move towards opposite sensation. Try out an opposite movement. If you're moving around too much, opposite movement might be to be still. If you're too still, opposite movement may be to get moving a little more. Opposite posture. If the shoulders are up, what happens when you drop them down? And then opposite breath pattern. So really kind of finding the sensation, locate it, and get that pendulum swinging in the opposite direction.
That's good. What are some, if somebody was recognizing now that they may need to seek out therapy, what might be some therapies or some things that counselors use to help people with anxiety?
Well, of course, the tried and true cognitive behavior therapy, recognizing thought patterns. It's what's considered top-down processing. So you're starting from the top, starting in the brain regions, neocortex, where our higher order thinking is, and where we're able to really process things logically. So cognitive behavioral therapy does that, but also finding a therapist who specializes in bottom-up treatment. So working from the body functions, someone who's trained and skilled in working from a somatic orientation, who can help you work with muscle tension and body posture and breath patterns, and help you locate sensations. And many of my clients don't know sensation words. When I ask them, what's that feel like in the body? They say, it feels, they use the feelings word. It feels angry or it feels sad. Well, let's get some more sensation words in your vocabulary. It feels tight, it feels loose, it feels warm, it feels cool, it feels tingly, right? So someone who's skilled at those kinds of techniques would be really, really good to really get some healing there in the body.
Yeah. I think the other thing to realize, God created anxiety too. Like we have this alarm system built in to our bodies. And I think a lot of it comes because of self-preservation. And I don't remember what the book I read this out of. It was probably last year I read this, but it was a really great analogy and understanding of anxiety. But he was talking, the author was talking about early man. And he was kind of asking, who do you think survives? Somebody with high anxiety? And this is like Old Testament time, or low. And the answer is high anxiety, because it's like, well, the high anxiety is probably not going to go and walk towards the saber-toothed tiger or
Correct.
Yes. So God knew that we needed this response. If you and I were walking through the woods and a bear walks out in front of us, I don't need to joke with that bear. I don't need to be clever with that bear. I have an automatic response that goes off in the body. The prefrontal cortex shrinks, and then all of a sudden I'm in fight or flight mode. The problem is we have a nation and a world that millions of people are in fight or flight right now. And one of the things I share with clients all the time is we have to be careful with the long duration of one experience. Like, we want moods and experiences.
I love that.
Moving in but when you're in heightened level of anxiety for days and then weeks, that's when it becomes a problem.
Yes, I love that you said that. I love that you touched on how fear and anxiety have actually preserved us. We're actually here alive today because of the role of fear in our lives. But so there's a distinction there for me between fear and anxiety. Fear, I think, helps a little bit more with a threat that's a little more immediate. Like crossing the street, fear is what has me looking both ways before I cross, because the fear is being hit by a car, right? So I need that, or else we would all have, met our fate
Sure.
without those fears. But to me, anxiety comes into play when every time now you cross the street or about to cross the street, you pause much longer than you need to, maybe not even crossing, because now there's anxiety that there's cars coming when they're really not. And maybe you're missing the window of time to cross because that anxiety is there that I'm definitely going to get hit by a car, right? So fear is definitely needed to cross, but anxiety will have you standing on the side of the road much longer than you need to.
Yeah, that's really good. So in this new era of COVID-19, you and I talked a little bit before about how do we normalize this? Because I know in my lifetime, I've never lived through a period like this. I've never, and I think most people, I talked to my 97-year-old grandfather the other day, and he talked about a few experiences in his life where he's experienced so much that were somewhat similar to this, but in my lifetime, I haven't experienced that. So, talk to me about how do we normalize this thing for not only clients, not only people who are listening, but also us as therapists.
Yeah, well, I like what you said earlier, Matt, about the stimulus being real. So I think that's the first part that we want to normalize, that this threat is real, it's actual, we're not making it up. It's not perceived, and normalizing also that there's not a lot we can do about it. We are being told to stay in the home, and the way to fight it is to stay away from it. And that may seem very unnatural for people, the runners and the fighters of the world who like to go out and actually fight threats or feel like they have more control of the running process. So there's not a lot to do with that energy. So just normalizing that part, but also a major component about this virus is we can't see it, right? You can't track it. And so just think about how heightened that causes the anxiety to become when there's a threat that you can't see. Many of us would rather deal with a threat that we can track and trace. So that just causes the anxiety to go through the roof there, because now we feel like we have very little control because you can't see a virus, right, without a microscope. So it could be anywhere. It could be on that door handle you just touched. It could be in the air, in the space where you were just talking to your neighbor, right? That makes us feel very vulnerable. So I would argue that this anxiety is going up because we can't properly track it. And there's this negative belief that what we can't see will be bad. What we can't see will be bad. Honestly, which is the opposite of faith. So that's where the faith comes in. Our faith comes in right there because faith is all about unseen. So faith is trusting in the goodness of the unseen and that God is working in the unseen. But, our heart rates, our blood pressure, those things are still relevant right now, because this virus, we don't know where it is.
Mm-hmm. You make a really good point, and I'll share a little self-disclosure. For me, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, we got word that our neighbor, who's a nurse and goes to our church, and she was diagnosed and was sent home on a home quarantine. And I remember having a conversation with my wife that night. We have a 2-year-old daughter who has a compromised immune system. And I was standing in the living room, and that fear just overwhelmed me because it's like, I can't protect my family. I can't see this. If there's an intruder, I got a shot.
Yes, right.
But with this thing, it was so overwhelming because, as a husband and as a father, that is like indoctrinated into me to protect these two women in my life from this invisible thing that I have no idea. And so that makes us feel like, I think the word continues to come back to control. It's like this. We get locked into these patterns. I was listening to Dr. Henry Cloud. He was talking on a podcast as well, and he was talking about the idea of control, and that we kind of set our lives up into these routines so that it's predictable. Well,
Yeah,
it's not predictable anymore.
not predictable.
Yeah.
Not predictable at all.
Talk to me a little bit about you. Like, what have you noticed, either through the changes in our work, or even in your personal life since this whole thing became real, a couple weeks ago?
So what I've been noticing both in myself and even in clients that I've encountered in the past month, I'm honestly owning the fact that I'm in survival mode and I'm making that okay right now. I'm just literally just trying to take it one moment at a time and just feeling the shock of what's happening. I'm trying to just do some very normal things every day. Get up, make the bed, eat breakfast, play with the kids, have lunch, these very normal things. But in a sense, I know I'm not feeling very deeply what's really happening because I feel like I can't. I have to keep kind of mobilizing in some way to create some normalcy for myself and for my kids and my family. So give it 30 days or 60 days. And this is what I'm telling clients. I think many of us are going to start thawing out and coming out of shock and really start mentally wrestling with the truth of what's happening and all of the loss and all of the change. So that's where I am, and that's where a lot of my clients are. But also, too, there's links to the past wrapped up in this virus and in this crisis. One processing question I've been asking clients, pretty much all of them, is what does this remind you of? And I'm getting some really, really good feedback, painful feedback, but this is a reminder for a lot of people of something from their past, times where they were, maybe punished harshly if they're a teenager or an adult survivor of something, times where they were isolated, either because of their depression or anxiety, but this is a reminder of that isolation, times where people were victimized in different ways. So I'm getting a lot of things coming up about what this isolation and separation from connection in people, it's bringing up a lot. It's bringing up quite a lot.
Yeah, I as well, I've had a lot of clients that I really thought were very close to termination, and we were, you know, doing extremely well, and then all of a sudden we have reverted almost all the way back because I think a lot of this has stirred up a lot of stuff that people may not even realize was there. And
Mm-hmm.
you and I were talking, I noticed that with myself too. I mean, 10 years ago I worked through an anxiety disorder, and that's what led me into the mental health world. And over the past couple of weeks, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, somebody's rearing their ugly head again. I've just noticed it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. um how are you doing as a mom? How are you handling this with your kids? I mean, what kind of conversations does that take?
Well, my children are young enough where they really don't know the wiser, so they
Hmm.
know that they're not in school. And so that's been the biggest conversation is we're not in school because there's, I told my 4-year-old, there's a germ out there, there's a germ
Hmm.
out there and it's making people sick. And it's really best that we stay safe right now. So you're not in school right now because of that. We have to stay safe. I try to use safety versus emphasizing danger and threat. Instead of saying, oh, it's dangerous, it's bad, it's going to hurt us, I rather just say, this is also we can stay safe. I've been emphasizing hand washing so we
Hmm.
can be safe, right? So that's where the emphasis is, and that's kind of where I'm parking it, because of their age.
Yeah.
And then we're just having lots of very normal conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, focusing on the safety aspect of it rather than, like, as we talked about earlier, bringing in the fear. Um,
Bring the elements of fear, right?
right.
Even though
Um,
it's real.
It is real, but I think there are ways that we can frame this, especially for, those populations and those age ranges that we don't want to traumatize them, from these types of things.
Hmm.
So, Tish, would you mind just kind of maybe sharing a little bit about your faith and how that comes into play, and how that's helping or assisting you through this time?
Yeah, so I've been walking with the Lord since I was 8 years old. I got saved at my church at that time. It was all very just spirit led. No one made me do it. I felt the move of the Holy Spirit over my heart, and I've been with Him ever since then. But not perfect, not a perfect relationship,
Hmm.
but it's been authentic. It's been real, and I've had my own battles with anxiety pretty much all of my life, just because there's just a legacy of dysregulation and fear and anxiety in my family of origin. So I know a thing or two about fear, and I know a thing or two about anxiety, and I'm constantly working through it. Um, but for me, I've been just referencing a lot the story of Jesus and the disciples on the boat in the storm out on the sea. And that's just really been a reference point for me, because what I love about that story, and I laugh and joke about it with friends and family and clients, is I really don't, I really don't believe Jesus was all that bothered by the storm. And I think he would have continued to sleep had not the disciples um, disturbed him. I
Hmm.
think they disturbed him more than the storm did. And so for me, it's really about having Jesus on the boat with you
Hmm.
during the storm and trusting him, even if he does not cause the storm to be still. Really, the peace and the healing and the solace comes from having him join in the storm with us. And so I really love that. Like I said, that's kind of where I'm touching back, as far as that's my base. Is that I feel everything. I feel every bit of this storm. I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my heart. I feel the dysregulation in my own belly, in my own head. But to know that he's on the boat with me and that he's feeling this all with us, it gives me a very, very nice, calming kind of regulation effect in my
Hmm.
mind, in my body, in my spirit. So I'm trying not to stretch myself to too many different anchors as far as in the scripture, but just the few that are really kind of guiding me through this. And that's one
Hmm.
of them.
That's great. You know, I constantly keep reminding myself through this that God's in control. I know that. And, I know, a little over 10 years ago, I was running life at a pace, and God used anxiety to kind of bring me to my knees, and I needed to listen.
Yeah.
And I feel like as I looked around the world and in our culture, you know, we were running a race at a pace that was just getting out of control. And if God wanted to get our attention and bring us to a complete stop, for us to start rethinking and reprioritizing and
Hmm.
focusing our energy on things that are actually important, I don't know a better way to do that than what he's doing right now. And
Yeah.
as scary as a time that this is, I have a lot of hope for where
Yeah.
we are headed,
Hmm.
for families who weren't even allowing themselves enough time to have dinner together, because
Yeah. Yeah.
we're always running and running and running and running this rat race that I don't know that we were getting anywhere. And so
Hmm.
my hope and prayer is that the conclusion, and I pray that there is a conclusion,
Yes.
that on the other side of this, we look at things and the world's maybe a little bit different of a place. I mean, that's my prayer.
I love that. I love that. I thank you for saying that. Thank you for emphasizing that. I'm with you there. I saw a post that said we don't need to go back to normal because normal wasn't working. And
Hmm.
that kind of quote, it just hit me in my soul.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly agree with it. And I agree with you. I think Jesus is doing something in what we thought was normal. And hey, I'm all for it. I'm along for the ride. Lord,
Hmm.
I'm just going to strap my seatbelt in a little bit, but take us
That's
where you
right.
need to take us,
Yeah.
so we can see the beauty of what he really wants to do with us, after this is over. And it will be over. It will be.
Well, Tish, I appreciate you a ton, and I certainly respect you as a therapist, and look up to you, and appreciate this conversation of anxiety. I don't know again, what this is going to look like, but I have a feeling as we, come out of this, a lot of people are going to want to have this discussion about what they've experienced. And I've had
Mhm.
conversations with people who haven't experienced anxiety their entire lives, and all of a sudden over the last month and a half, they're going through these experiences. So I think it's going to be a topic of conversation we're going to be talking about for a while.
Yeah, I'm just glad to be a part of the conversation and to be able to just share my own humanness, my own experiences with anxiety, my understanding of it. And my hope is still that Jesus he's in the tremble. He's in the tremble with us, right? He's the God of the tremble. So he gets what we're going through. He gets what's going on in our bodies. And as long as we can do small little things to move in opposite directions of what's happening, to locate cues of safety wherever we can find them, to find rest as we need it, to find movement as we need it, to find co-regulators, people who can help regulate with us. As long as we're doing those things, we're going to be okay.
We are going to be okay. We already know how the story ends, and we know Jesus is victorious. Tish is an excellent therapist, and just so appreciative of her sharing her knowledge on anxiety. But this conversation is far from over. I believe we will be talking about overcoming a lot of mental and emotional issues as we continue to live in the COVID-19 era. I want to thank Tish again. If you'd like to reach out to the show, please email us at experience@emerge.org or check out our website, emerge.org, for more information about who we are. Thank you for listening. So until next time, or when our Savior comes, God bless.